Some people are on the pitch. They think it's all over. It is now. Let's just jump right in with the most famous words in English football. Those iconic words from Kenneth Wolstenholme didn't just mark the end of a World Cup final. They actually marked the beginning of a massive national obsession. On that single afternoon at Wembley in 1966, England won the World Cup, seemingly taking their natural place at the top of the sport they literally invented. But what absolutely no one knew at the time was that they were stepping into a giant shadow, one they wouldn't escape for over half a century. Welcome to this explainer on chasing 1966, England's 60-year World Cup obsession. We're going to see that England's incredibly long World Cup history since that iconic win isn't just a string of random bad luck. No, it's actually a deeply fascinating psychological and tactical pattern. For 60 years now, across totally different generations, managers, and continents, the English national team has essentially been chasing the ghost of that one perfect summer. We're going to dive into the historical record to understand exactly why a nation packed with endless footballing resources has spent decades struggling to just repeat its greatest triumph. To make sense of it all, we are going to look at the 5 defining patterns of the chase: the shadow of 1966, the tyranny of the margins, the penalty spot curse, the gap between expectation and reality, and finally, the slow journey of modernization. Part 1, the shadow of 1966. To really grasp why England struggles so much today, you have to understand exactly how they won in the first place. Mainly because the country spent the next few decades completely misremembering its very own formula for success. Here's the truth of it. England didn't win by relying on flashy, individual superstars. Not at all. They won because their manager, Alf Ramsey, engineered this brilliantly disciplined system. It was a classic case of the team being way greater than the sum of its parts. He created the wingless wonders, famously abandoning traditional touchline wingers to just pack the midfield, demanding relentless, grueling physical work from every single player. He even benched his star striker, Jimmy Greaves, in the final simply because the collective system functioned better without him. Ramsey proved unequivocally that collective organization is what wins tournaments. But then, just 4 years later, we hit our second pattern, the tyranny of fine margins. The decline officially started in 1970 against West Germany. England arrived in Mexico with a squad that a lot of people argued was actually better than the '66 champions. But right before the quarterfinal, their legendary goalkeeper, Gordon Banks, suddenly fell ill. It was a freak occurrence. So, with a backup in goal, England completely blew a 2-goal lead and lost in extra time. It wasn't a total collapse, but it introduced this new, incredibly painful trend for England, losing by the absolute thinnest of margins. Part 2, the age of heartbreak. This takes us right into the darkest decades of English football, where the chase really just became this exhausting catalog of agonizing near misses. After utterly failing to even qualify for the World Cup for most of the 1970s, England finally returned in the 80s and 90s, only to discover entirely new, incredibly creative ways to have their hearts broken on the global stage. Talk about the absolute duality of those margins. In 1986, England was helplessly undone by both a blatant cheat and absolute pure genius from just one man, all in the span of 4 minutes. In the quarterfinal against Argentina, Diego Maradona literally punched the ball into the net, a blatant foul completely missed by the referee, forever dubbed the hand of God. And then, literally moments later, he gets the ball and dribbles past half the England team to score what is widely considered the greatest goal in World Cup history. England wasn't eliminated by a better team grinding them down. They were knocked out by 2 complete freak moments they were powerless to stop. And then, of course, came the penalty executioner. Starting in 1990, the penalty shootout became a terrifying, recurring nightmare for an entire generation of players. It was a massive psychological barrier. Players were stepping up to take the highest pressure kicks of their entire lives, with virtually zero preparation. No scientific process, nothing. It was treated as a complete lottery, just a cruel twist of fate. And from Turin in 1990 to Wembley in '96, Saint-Étienne in '98, and Germany in 2006, that lottery sent England packing every single time. Part 3, the golden generation. Let's fast forward a bit to the early 2000s, where expectation and reality violently collided. This was an era where England possessed what were arguably the best individual players on the entire planet. We're talking household names: David Beckham, Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Wayne Rooney. Because of this, the public expectation wasn't just to compete, it was an absolute, unyielding demand to win the whole thing. But the contrast in philosophy here is absolutely stark.
Remember how the 1966 squad sacrificed their stars for the sake of the system? Well, the Golden Generation bent the system to fit rival stars, and they won absolutely nothing. Successive managers kept trying to cram all their famous midfielders into the exact same starting lineup, completely ignoring tactical balance. They prioritized reputation over function. And the crazy results? Despite all that unbelievable Premier League talent, this generation didn't reach a single major semifinal.
Honestly, there is a kind of cosmic irony to how this era finally collapsed in 2010. It's almost like the historical scales were balancing themselves out. Back in the 1966 final, England's crucial third goal bounced straight down off the crossbar and was awarded, even though people still debate to this day if it fully crossed the line. Fast forward to 2010 against Germany, Frank Lampard hits a shot that definitively crossed the line by a full yard. It wasn't even close, yet the officials completely missed it. It was a brutal piece of poetic injustice that confirmed this specific era of English football was entirely spent.
Part 4. The Modern Rebuild. So, after completely hitting rock bottom, the English football establishment finally woke up and realized they needed to completely modernize their psychology and their structures. For decades, the lazy strategy had just been hire a famous manager, throw 11 stars on the pitch, and cross your fingers. That method was thoroughly, irreparably broken.
That brutal awakening really hit home in 2016. It was the absolute nadir. A completely paralyzed England lost a tiny Iceland, a nation of about 300,000 people. It proved definitively that having raw Premier League talent without any psychological resilience was completely useless. There were no bad referee decisions to blame this time, no penalty shootouts to hide behind, just a vastly wealthier, heavily favored team entirely frozen by the fear of failure. This total humiliation is what finally forced the FA to tear down their old assumptions and build a unified, long-term system from the youth academies all the way up. Enter Gareth Southgate, who stepped in and literally scientifically dismantled the penalty curse in 2018. He turned it from a doomed national fate into a highly rehearsed, completely solvable problem. And it's fitting, right? Southgate famously missed a crucial penalty himself in 1996. He flat out refused to accept that shootouts were just luck. He brought in deep psychological research. His team practiced kicks while physically exhausted to simulate game conditions. He taught his players to control their breathing and take active ownership of that long, terrifying walk from the halfway line. And in 2018, it actually worked. England finally won a World Cup penalty shootout. But, you see, Southgate's methodical rebuild kind of just evolved the heartbreak into a brand new era of near misses. They were getting closer, sure, but they still lacked that final, ruthless killer instinct. They were reaching semifinals in 2018 and back-to-back European finals in 2021 and 2024, but against the absolute elite, teams like Croatia, Italy, France, and Spain, they kept falling just a fraction short. Southgate successfully cured the paralyzing fear, but he just couldn't quite unlock the tactical ruthlessness needed to actually cross the finish line and lift a trophy. Part 5, the chase goes on, which brings us right to the threshold of the 2026 World Cup, where this 60-year chase continues with a fascinating and highly ironic twist. Southgate stepped down, and the FA looked at this newly resilient, talent-packed squad and decided they needed a completely different profile of leadership to get them over that final hurdle. And there is a brutal, almost poetic irony here. England, famously tormented by Germany for decades, has literally hired a German mastermind to finally bring the clinical edge they've always lacked. The Thomas Tuchel formula is wildly different. Tuchel isn't about soft cultural resets. He's an elite club tactician obsessed with granular details and pressing structures. He prioritizes cold, hard tactical edges over sentimental culture, and he's entirely willing to drop established superstars if they don't fit his highly specific system. It's a massive, massive bet that England already has the right culture in place, and now they just need the cold tactical science of a serial winner. And the immediate impact? Zero. That is 0 goals conceded in a flawless 8-match 2026 qualifying run. It showcased a whole new level of defensive control for the team. England scored 22 goals and didn't let a single one in. It was this perfect synthesis of their incredible attacking depth layered directly with Tuchel's disciplined defensive rigidity. Now, obviously, qualifying is entirely different from the insane pressure cooker of a World Cup knockout stage, but it definitely signaled a team that was operating with absolute mechanical efficiency. So after 60 years of heartbreaks, tiny margins, and agonizing near misses, will the chase finally end in 2026? Think about it. The national team has transformed from the arrogant inventors of the game who refuse to adapt into a deeply humble, scientifically prepared, and tactically modern unit. They've learned the hard lessons, but as history constantly shows us, World Cups are decided by fine margins, split-second moments, and the unpredictable bounce of a ball. The stage is totally set for 2026. Will it finally come home? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. It's been an incredible historical journey to unpack with you all. Keep learning, keep watching, and I'll catch you next time.